Hi, it's Amanda Spratt, Team BikeExchange Jayco rider, 3 times Aussie champ, 2 times World Championship medalist, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Amanda Spratt, 3 times Australian National Road Cycling Champion, Dual World UCI Road Championship medalist, and so much more. This has been a long time in the making, but welcome to the Physical Performance Show.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Great to be on here. And yeah, I've listened to quite a few of the episodes and big fan, so it's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Well, Amanda, you have been on the list for some time, and across busy schedules, it can sometimes be a diary challenge, but there is some great things happening, right, in the world of cycling, and your Australian Olympic teammate, I'll start that again. Your Australian cycling teammate, Rachel Neylan, back on episode 248, has forever changed the way I view cycling that's undertaken by females. As she said, we don't call it female soccer, and we don't call it male soccer. We call it soccer. We call it cycling. So there is some great things happening with this year, the Tour de France, and so much more. You must be like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah, it's so true. I think, the sport is really, really progressing, especially in the last couple of years. And like you said, we've got the Tour de France for the first time this year, or, in its current form. So we're having an 8-day Tour de France. And I think everybody really wants to start that race. Everyone's putting their hand up to be on the start line. We're getting a lot more races, a lot more professionalism. You can see the level is really, really rising as well. And the TV coverage as well, which has been really, really important and really exciting. And I think just for developing the sport in general and getting the younger riders coming through, I think, when I was a young rider coming through, I remember watching the men on TV, but there wasn't that opportunity just to see the females racing because it wasn't there. And I always think you can be what you can see. And so I think the impact of what, for example, the Tour de France is going to have for us is going to be huge, that young women, girls anywhere around the world can actually see what they want to be.
Gosh, that's powerful. You can see what you want to be. As a young girl growing up in Penrith, New South Wales, Australia, I believe you started on the bike, BMX style, and then you went to road cycling around 11 years of age. Who were you looking at that stage? You can see what you want to be. Who was inspiring a young Amanda Spratt in the world of cycling?
Yeah, I think for me, it's always been a family sport. So, I started out on the BMX bike when I was 8-9 years old, went along with my brother, Nick. He's 18 months younger than me. So we're always sort of doing the sport together. We have an older sister, 5 years older, but no one knows about her usually because she didn't do the cycling with us. So that's sort of how I got started in it. And my dad and my grandfather, they both used to race and ride. So I guess I was inspired to take up the sport through them, not at a really high level, although I have heard, especially my dad could have been better if he'd been a bit more disciplined. But he sort of introduced us to cycling and took us out riding. And like you said, I started on the road when I was 11, 12 years old. And I remember watching on SBS the Tour de France highlights at 6 p.m. every night, sit down and watch that and sort of start learning the tactics and the racing. And then Nick and I would go out riding with Dad on the road and have tactical meetings, and the whole goal of our ride would be to drop Dad. So, I think we were just inspired by each other, and then obviously watching the Tour de France, people like Robbie McEwen, Stuart O'Grady, they're riders that I really remember watching as a young up and coming cyclist, and then trying to put into practice some of those things out on the road.
Gosh, we featured Phil Liggett many episodes ago now, and I conceded to Phil Liggett that as a young child of cycling triathlon in the 90s, I would ride most rides with Phil Liggett commentating wins in my head about me breaking away. And, it was quite the era. But Australia has had such a rich legacy with Kathy Watt taking the gold, Sarah Carrigan taking the gold. You have been on the radar for several years, many years now, at the top level of the sport, including as I mentioned at the top, the World Championship medals, and of course your 3 times national road title. But what to date would you say, Amanda? Obviously, this show's themed the highs, lows, and learnings. What would you say has been your career high of all your performances and amazing resume to date? What takes the cake?
Gosh, that's a hard one. I think. Yeah, I turned professional in 2012 with Green Edge Cycling, as it was then. And yeah, since that time, I've had some amazing teammates like Judith Arndt, Emma Johansson, Annemiek van Vleuten in the latter half of the time there. And I think, for me, I think that not necessarily the highs are not always the races where I've won or I've got the biggest result, but where I've just had my best performance. And I think that's how I sometimes value my biggest highs, are when I've turned up at a race in the absolute best condition I can be in and best form and been at the real level that I need to be at. And I think if I look back to the 2018 Giro, where we went there as a team with Annemiek as our leader, and I was there to support Annemiek, and yeah, it was a really tough and epic tour. We raced up the Zoncolan, which for any listeners here will know that's an epic, crazy, steep, 15, 20%, 8-9 kilometer climb. That's just like, some of my teammates called it the backbreaker, but we got up there. But I just have such epic memories from that Giro. And in the end, Annemiek finished in the Maglia Rosa. I won a stage earlier. I was in the Maglia Rosa for a day as well and ended up third on the GC. Annemiek won. So it wasn't one where I won the overall, but it was just such a team effort from the staff, from the riders. And yeah, it's just such a fun time and one of the biggest highlights of my career for sure. And obviously the World Championship medals are right up there, and definitely probably personal highlights for me. But I just think, yeah, that Giro really stands out in my mind as such an epic and fun and successful, and just where everything sort of came together.
Yeah, it's interesting in the world of cycling, as opposed to individual pursuits, the team element. And you've been with Team BikeExchange, Jayco, now since you turned pro in 2012. Is that correct? So it's been a 10-year love story. Yep. So I've been here since it started. Longest standing member of the women's team, definitely. There's only a few of the male riders, I think, who have been here from the start as well. But yeah, it's a project that I fell in love with from the start, and I've just seen, that every year I've been getting better and better, and learnt from riders like Judith Arndt, who was world champion in the time trial, and Emma Johansson, who won multiple races, and then more recently Annemiek van Vleuten. So I just feel like I've had amazing riders to learn from and develop myself. And it's an Australian team, and that culture as well around it has been really something that's gotten the best out of me. Annemiek van Vleuten, what have you learnt from someone like Annemiek?
Oh, so many. I just think, she's the world's best cyclist. And I think, you don't get there by, doing things by halves. I think she'd have to be one of the toughest competitors I've ever come across. I just think she does things that you might think are crazy become normal for her. Like, I remember the World Championships where I finished in Innsbruck with the silver medal. Annemiek had crashed earlier in that race and then finished the race. And then we found out after that she has a broken kneecap. So she still got on and finished the race with a broken knee, which, I can't. I think most of us would stop the race and think, okay, something's wrong. But I just think her level or ability to suffer, I haven't seen that in many athletes before. And I think that's something I really admire, that she can just go to the absolute point of breaking. Without breaking. And that's impressive for me. And obviously, I think anyone who follows her on Strava knows that she trains. She has a lot of volume, a lot of crazy training. And I remember I've asked her a few times, do you ever think if someone looks on your Strava and they try to copy your training, are you worried about that? Sometimes, training's a bit more private. And she said, they can try, but they'll just kill themselves. So I think she just has this mentality. She knows what she's doing is crazy. Not crazy, but just not how everyone would train. And it's, really pushing her body. And I think for me, it's just impressive that she can push her body so far, but she just can push it to the limit without going over the limit. And you don't see her sick very often. You don't see her injured very often. And I just think that's really impressive for me. And even things like recently in this season, she hadn't had a huge win yet. And, the media start to talk about, she hasn't had a big win yet. Is her reign over as one of the best riders? She doesn't seem to be able to ride everyone off the wheel anymore. And then, just recently we've raced Liège-Bastogne-Liège. So people were saying it all before this race. And then, she only needs to hear a little bit of that. And then the fire will be even burning more and more in her stomach. And in Liège, she rode everyone off the wheel again. And, there was a group of 4 really strong riders trying to chase her back. And she won that in impressive style. So I just think, she just has an amazing physical ability, but also the mindset that she has as well.
Yeah, gosh, Hans, Olympic champion, 3 times world road champion. And you mentioned that you had tuned into NMX's coach Louis Delahunty on a former Coach's Corner episode of the show. So recommended listening, jump back to that if you missed Louis Delahunty. Amanda, as you know, we theme this the highs, lows and learn-ins. You've had some recent challenges which you are overcoming, which we want to dig into, but just curious, what's been the darkest day in your professional cycling career to date, Amanda?
Yeah, I've certainly had a few injuries over my time. I think even the darkest day, I'd go back to 2008, 2009, before the Green Edge days. I was still racing over in Europe with the Australian Institute of Sport. So then it wasn't as common to be in a professional team. And in 2008, 2009, I was actually out of the sport with piriformis syndrome. So I had a sciatic nerve issue that required surgery, and it was actually a pain and injury that I'd had for a few years prior to that, but we sort of didn't get a diagnosis, and I went straight from juniors in 2005 and was on a full AIS scholarship in 2006. And I was a bit afraid to say anything because for me it felt like a bit of an invisible injury, and yeah, it was hard to describe what was happening. So I sort of rode through the pain for a couple of years until it became unbearable. And then finally, I went to the AIS and lived there for 2008, 2009 and worked with some wonderful people like Craig Purdom, Greg Lovell, who really got, who managed to find out what it was and had surgery. And I had almost a year off the bike and then could slowly come back from that, but had a lot of chronic pain from that. And for me, that's probably the darkest time, not just, physically I couldn't do what I wanted to do, but I was in a lot of pain and trying to overcome that. I was living in the AIS resis and amazing support around me. But in that environment, you've got elite athletes coming in, training camps coming out, going to compete. And I was just always there and, just trying to rehab and get back and was, really depressed and really down and just wanted to be able to ride my bike and be normal again. And it's just a really slow process. And for any elite athlete where probably being patient is probably not our strength. So that was definitely a hard one to sort of, be patient and realize it could get better. But that was probably, it's not one day, but the darkest period in my career. But at the same time, was just really grateful that I had people like Craig and Greg. And I could name quite a few people there that really looked out for me and supported me through that time as well as AIS itself. So I'm happy to have gotten through that. And then sort of, that was sort of career phase 2. And as you mentioned, I'm now coming back from iliac artery endofibrosis, which was diagnosed and operated on last year. So there's definitely been a few challenges amongst all the highs.
Gosh, yeah. And I guess let's talk about that iliac artery endofibrosis diagnosis and treatment, which required surgery. But back to the piriformis condition that you went through, I guess the hard part with any athlete is the uncertainty. And there's varying levels of uncertainty. It's uncertainty of time to be ready for competition again. It's also sometimes uncertainty of, will this ever end? It's easy for that light to grow dimmer.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I was also a younger athlete then, sort of 20, 21 years old. I definitely don't have the knowledge or the calmness or understanding that I have now around my body either. And for me, I thought, okay, if I step away from the sport, then no one will want me back. I won't be in a team anymore. I remember there was talk about changing my scholarship over to a medical scholarship instead of an athlete one. And for me at that time, I thought that was like you're out forever, but I just didn't have that understanding or maturity to realize that was actually the best option in this moment. And it is hard. As you mentioned, I've been on a bike since I was 8, 9 years old and this is my career and what I was really chasing. So in that moment, and people were saying, we're not sure if you're going to get back to that top level. If you're going to get back to that top level. And I'm really grateful that, Craig was there and he really believed in that we could get back there. And also he got me in touch with a pain specialist called Lauren Mosley, and we did a lot of pain retraining as well, which was amazing. As I mentioned, I had the chronic pain for 2-3 years. So even after the surgery, when I rode a bike, then I had pain straight away because my body was only ever thinking that riding meant pain. And so meeting Lorimer was really a changing moment for me. And he took me through a test showing me pictures of right legs and left legs. My right leg was where I had the problem. And every time it was a right leg in a different position, my brain just couldn't sort of work it out, or I didn't know how my right leg was supposed to look. Left leg was fine, which, I mean, it seems crazy when he described the test to me, and I thought, I don't know what he's saying. Like, this doesn't make sense. And then I did the test and I thought, okay, maybe there's something in this. And then, with another physio there, Peter Blanche, we ended up going and taking photos of me on a bike in all different positions. And then part of my training then was to sit and look at me on a bike on my foot close up and say, is that my right foot or my left foot? And slowly my brain started to recognize again how my foot looked and how my leg looked. And then I had to watch videos of myself before, just self-made videos where I was riding without pain and imagine and remember what it was like to ride without pain. And so it was quite a really long process. But for me, that's the biggest thing also in my career I've found is just the people that you surround yourself with is really important as well, and people that believe in you and believe in what you can do. So I think, that was a really dark time, but really grateful for the people that I had around me.
Gosh, some of the names I would classify as direct and indirect mentors of mine there. Peter Blanche, Craig Purdom, they are really Australian physiotherapy royalty of sorts. The external or the iliac artery endofibrosis, what were the symptoms that led to that diagnosis? You went to Tokyo 2021. It was a very challenging course, one that certainly on paper matched your profile as a world-class climber. Take us through what happened in Tokyo and then the ensuing diagnosis of the artery endofibrosis after that.
Yeah, so I guess in Tokyo, and considering the years before, I was definitely there as a leader and a realistic medal chance. And that was the expectation as well from me, from others, is that we were going there to try and win a medal with me as the leader. And so, I went to Tokyo with that expectation. And in the race, it was, not much happened in the first part. And then it got harder and harder and harder. And then legs just were exploding. I had no power left in my legs, really burning quads, which has sort of been a theme that had happened throughout the year. And if I look back before Tokyo even, I'd say for the 6 to 12 months before, I'd had warning signs of this in really key moments in races or in training. Then I just had a really bad burning sensation in my quads, where I just felt like I went from having power to having no power when it was above threshold and really hard. And the other symptom for me, I think, during that period was that I just wasn't recovering between sessions anymore, or between days. I used to be able to do 2-3 day blocks really well, and now I was getting to sort of the second day, and I couldn't back up, and we were sort of having to shorten sessions and change things without having really done anything too differently. I think the other reason we weren't able to pick up on it earlier than Tokyo is that it had been a bit of a different year. I stayed in Europe for the winter because of COVID and the travel restrictions coming home. So I made a decision to stay in Europe and sort of prepare there and not put myself through 2 weeks hotel quarantine. So it was a bit of a different build-up. So we always there was always a reason, like maybe it was a different build-up. And then I had the sensations in a smaller race in Belgium. I think by the time we got to the Giro, which was just before Tokyo, I could feel that something wasn't quite right. But we just thought maybe a bit of fatigue, bit of this, bit of that. So Tokyo for me was sort of the turning point where we went there and it just really wasn't normal. We got to the climbing section of the course, which is, as you mentioned, that's the part of the course where, I was going to come to the front and which I really enjoyed. And I was dropped and I really couldn't even keep up with dropped riders that, normally in any situation I'd be up there at the front. So for me, it felt really devastating because this had been a goal for so many years now, and I'd been to Tokyo a couple of years before. I knew the course, I knew everything that I was in for, and I really felt like all the preparation was there. And grateful that I had a good chat to Kevin Hernandez, who was our cycling doctor on the ground there, and he said, I think you really need to get checked for the iliac artery endofibrosis condition. It sounds like this could be it. I mean, no power in the legs, and especially in that sort of cycling position as well, and when it gets really hard. And so him, alongside our team doctors, Steve Baines from Britain, they were able to get an appointment for me in Holland 4 weeks later. So I had 4 weeks of waiting for those tests, and lucky that I had 1 day of testing. At the end of that 1 day of testing, then I knew that was the diagnosis.
Gosh, I mean, anyone that rides a bike of any level, from a beginner through to elite, knows the feeling of disillusionment when you get dropped, no matter who it is, even if it's in a local group ride. It's demoralizing. It's frustrating, let alone the Olympic Games. You've set yourself up for, it's been a childhood dream. You're a contender, medal chance, podium potential, and you just you're not firing, and you know something's wrong. I mean, but at that point, let's not lose sight. You did not have a diagnosis, so mentally that must have been, the diagnosis came 6 or so weeks later. That must have been just absolutely soul destroying. You wrote on Instagram after the race, reflecting, obviously still at this point, not with a diagnosis of what was going on, that the Olympic Games road race was a tough one. I can't hide from the fact that I'm so disappointed with my own performance. No words right now really for that, but I know together with those closest to me, we will investigate and move onwards together. I'm so grateful to have an amazing group of people around me in times like this. So there's that theme emerging again, Amanda, of the team around you. And as you said, a few weeks later, you had the diagnosis made. Can you put into your own words what the condition actually is for those that are trying to figure out what this means, endofibrosis of the iliac artery?
Yeah, so basically what it is, well, for me, basically I had my arteries checked and my arteries had narrowed. So I think the artery normally is 1 centimeter in diameter and mine was down to 4 mil in diameter. And that's just, and then when I was actually in a riding position and pumping blood, then it narrowed even further. So alongside the narrowing, my artery had also become kinked. So instead of being a nice straight artery, it now looked a bit more like an S shape. So, just walking around generally, normally, it was okay for the blood to get through. But as soon as I'm in a riding position and then you're crunched, and so then there's already, a bit less space there, combined with the narrowing and the S shape, there was essentially, very minimal blood getting into my leg when I'm trying to go hard on a bike, which is exactly the opposite of what you want to be happening. And that's also why, once I'm at threshold or once I'm doing higher intensity, longer duration efforts where you really need the blood to be pumping and pumping and pumping, then that was sort of the time when it became the worst. And for me, that's the sort of rider I am, and they're my biggest strengths normally. And so it's just sort of like all my strengths were taken away from me with this condition.
And the surgery required, I think, saphenous vein transplant or graft, correct, to the affected area of the artery?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a few different operations they can do. Mine was sort of the worst case scenario operation, I guess you could say. So they've taken a vein from my leg and then they've cut away the bad part of the artery and then transgrafted in the vein from my leg, and that vein has now become the artery. And so it was quite a serious operation, I guess. I have 2 large scars on my legs, 5-6 centimeters long. I have a 12 centimeter scar on my stomach and another 5 centimeter one in my groin where they've had to cut me open. And as well as, hundreds of internal stitches as well. And obviously a really extensive rehabilitation period as well. You just need to, I had to keep my heart rate under 100 for 9-10 weeks, which in the beginning as a fit athlete was not that much of a drama, but as I became less fit, definitely became a bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, gosh, and I mean, you're not alone with this as an elite cyclist, having gone through it. Stuart O'Grady, Baden Cook, both Australian cycling legends, if you like, and then obviously your teammate there, who you've mentioned, former teammate Annemiek van Vleuten herself has also gone through it. So you must have taken some level of encouragement and optimism through their learned experiences on what you could expect on the other side.
Yeah, definitely. And certainly Annemiek, someone that I reached out to and spoke to, and her biggest advice to me was respect the recovery timelines and take your time and don't rush it, which coming from Annemiek is, I took that very seriously, because if she can push the timelines with anything, then she will. And also Sarah Roy, my recent teammate as well, she just changed teams at the beginning of this year, but she also had the surgery. So she's another one that was really helpful in just letting me know how it is and how the experience is and the recovery. And And yeah, I mean, it's major abdominal surgery. So even things like you really can't look after yourself for the first couple of weeks, just getting in bed, out of bed. Just, I ended up hiring an Airbnb in Holland. I had to stay in Holland for 2 weeks just to be near the hospital in case anything went dramatically wrong and you needed to go back in. Even things like hiring an Airbnb, I just hired one with stairs and didn't even think about the fact that stairs could be an issue. It was nice to have those people like Annemiek and Sarah in particular to talk to.
And your reintroduction of cycling to your days and weeks started with how many minutes? And by 10 weeks, what were you up to?
By 10 weeks, I was doing 1 hour, maybe twice a day. And then we started with 2-hour rides and built up from there. But sort of from the first 4 weeks, I really couldn't do anything. Just some small walks here and there, morning, afternoon. And then we sort of started a little bit on the elliptical trainer in the gym. But again, under 100 heart rate. It became a bit of a challenge. And I just felt like one of these people in the gym that you see that don't look like they're moving at all. And you think, it just as a person who's an elite athlete and so used to pushing myself, I found this probably really challenging to be able to do that. But at the same time, it felt good to be at least moving and doing some form of exercise. So we started with that and then a bit of swimming as well, and then slowly started introducing the cycling as well. My coach came up and visited for a couple of days. I was still in Switzerland at this point. So he brought his mountain bike and I rode his mountain bike so I could be on a nice upright position, and we went for a little 45-minute ride together. So, yeah, I mean, looking back, it was 9-10 weeks, which in hindsight is not that long. But, when you're used to training at the level that I do and normally we'll have 2 or 3 weeks off max in October. So it felt like a really long time.
Was there any apprehension? I mean, you were back racing, if I'm correct here, in January 2022 at the Australian Road Nationals. You had the surgery, I believe, October 2021. So that was quite remarkable that you made the start line for the Road Nationals.
Yeah, the Santos Festival of Cycling. So that was in Adelaide, the Downunder. So yeah, we were thinking about the nationals, but then thought, no problem. You're right though. It was January 2022 back racing, and I think that caught a lot of people by surprise. But honestly, it was more for me. I'm someone that enjoys racing and enjoys just being around the team, and it had been a really long period of rehab since October, just sort of, doing rides here and there and getting back into it. And then the opportunity came up to just go to Adelaide and be with the team and do some racing. And we have some new younger riders on the team. So it was a bit more about the fun factor. And I'm someone that I love riding my bike, but I also love racing and being around the team and that, that team atmosphere as well. So it was just a bit of a way to break up the rehab and have a bit of fun again. So for me, it was a good option.
Was there any apprehension to lay down the power? Was there a little bit of fear initially to overcome around the worry of how your system would hold up?
I think not fear to put down the power. I was confident that, we knew that the 9-10 weeks was a conservative approach, but the Dutch doctors didn't apologize for that. They said it was important. So I knew that by that point the artery would be strong enough. Probably more just apprehension around overthinking, I guess, like thinking when I was racing hard, okay, am I feeling the same pain? Is this wrong? Is the surgery successful? I'm not sure. That sort of feeling of like just overthinking, how is it going? Is this pain good, bad? And then also just racing in Australia. Normally in January, I'm in pretty good shape. I'm, trying to win nationals. I'm, trying to win the Tour Downunder, the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race. So I'm used to being at that level. So just maybe a little bit of just personal apprehension about how that would be perceived. And I mean, everyone knew I'd had the operation, but just on a personal level, I like to also, I'm a racer and I want to race well and race hard. And I just knew that I wasn't quite at that level. But at the same time, we had, a lot of success with Ruby Roseman Gunnan and Georgia Baker as well, winning out in Adelaide. So that was also fun.
Nice consolation. And at the moment, as we record May 2022, you've just come off the back of some European races there. What percentage of your best would you say you're at the moment, Amanda? Where are you on this recovery journey, 0 to 100%?
Yeah, so I'd say I'm probably 70, 80% at the moment. yeah, having spoken to Annemiek and Sarah as well, they've both said sort of 8 months. And for some reason in my head, I thought I had 6 months in my head. And of course, I thought I'd beat the timeline. But so I think in the classics period, I had to realize I still need a little bit more time just to get that race intensity and the strength back as well. So I'd say probably 70, 80%, but progressing in every race. I raced a lot of the classic races in March and April. And for me, what was pleasing was that I started in Strade Bianche, which was the beginning of March. And as soon as the race was hard, I exploded. I was out the back finishing in Gruppetto, minutes down. And each race got better and better to the point where, I was off in breakaways in Amstel Gold and Liège-Bastogne-Liège, which were my last 2 races, Flèche-Wallonne, sorry. And then came 10th in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. So I feel like every race got better and better. And I was there in the final and feeling more like myself. And it's funny because last year I was 10th in Liège-Bastogne-Liège and bitterly disappointed because I was really there to be on the podium and to win. And that was to aim for the win realistically. And that was my expectation. And I was really disappointed there. And then this year, 10th felt like a victory, this moment where I thought, cool, like I'm back. This is great. I'm so happy with this. I had a great ride. So for me, that's also just nice to remember as well, is that, you always have to think about the context and where you're at. And, different results can mean different things depending where you're coming from.
Gosh, that's powerful, isn't it? Always think about the context. One year you're disappointed with 10th, and the next year you are, very pleased with 10th, wanting more. Yeah. You commented on Instagram after your 10th place there at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Slowly but surely the legs are coming back. I know there is still a way to go until I'm at full throttle, but honestly, so happy with 10th today. But totally different meaning for me to last year. So you are on the way back. Look out, world, 70 to 80%. And talking about the world, the Australian cycling scene is buzzing with the UCI World Road Cycling Championship heading to Wollongong at the end of the year. That's going to be huge.
Yeah, I'm so excited just to be smiling so much when I think about this. A home world championships is going to be amazing. Actually, my first ever elite world titles were in Geelong in 2010. So I know what a home world championships feels like. And, it's the sort of worlds where every Australian rider will put their hands up and try to be selected. So everyone wants to be a part of it. It's in Wollongong. It's an hour from where I live. I've grown up training on a lot of those roads as a younger rider as well. I went there over the summer and rode around the course. And it's an amazing course. And I'm extremely biased, but I think it's one of the most scenic and beautiful courses I've seen as well. So I just think it's going to be amazing. And they've done a really, really good job with the course. And a really tough one as well. I think it's just going to be a race of attrition and certainly one that can suit me and another rider like Grace Brown as well, who's in really top shape for Australia. So I think overall, as an Australian team, we can go there with a real chance of being on the podium.
Gosh, and plenty of months to go from 70 to 80 to 100% full throttle, full gas. Amanda, before we do a performance round, just on the learnings, listeners of this show, we're always, including me, thirsting for information around fueling optimal performance. What have you learnt over your career to date around fueling for optimal endurance sports performance? What would you be? I'm going to put you on the spot here. What would be your top 3 tips for fueling?
I think, first tip is to actually fuel the training. I think a lot of people don't have the information or don't know really what fueling looks like. And I think over my career, I've realized that it's a lot more than I think. I know maybe 10 years ago, we were talking about 30, 60 grams of carbs an hour. And now in more recent years, it's sort of around the 80 to 90 grams of carbs an hour. So even now, I think there's research around mountain marathon runners, I think I've read, doing 120 grams an hour. So definitely fueling the training and fueling the racing. So for example, in a race, I'm aiming for around that 80, 90 grams of carbs an hour. And for me, from the start of the race as well. And the biggest thing I've noticed is just how much more energy I have later in the race when I'm fueling well like that, both for one-day races and then in terms of just recovering between tours or between harder training days. And so that also leads into, in terms of fueling, I think also the recovery important and getting back in the carbohydrates and the protein for muscle recovery after is really important. And for me, I always try to do that in the first hour, is getting that fuel back in. And the other thing as well that we do is the carb loading, or making sure we have a really good, day before of carbohydrate intake. And that can look like 8 to 10 grams of carbs per kilogram body weight. And then normally the morning of a race, we'll eat sort of 3 hours before. I normally get in 100, 120 grams of carbs. So I am a bit particular with this, and I'm working one-on-one with Louise Burke now. So that's been really fun to work with her and get that sort of insight and help to plan that. But they're probably the three biggest things, is really knowing how to fuel your training and trying it. And I think it's definitely a trial and error sort of thing. Like, I know the first time someone said, eat 80 grams an hour, it's not something you can just go out and just chuck it in. I remember many years ago we did that in a training ride, and I think half of us ended up vomiting on the side of the road. So it's definitely something you have to train your gut to do. But I think if you can do it, and I still to this day have training sessions where I will periodize the training, and then we'll look at it and say, okay, these are going to be really hard sessions or really key sessions. Let's do race fueling here. Let's practice the race fueling. So it is something, it's almost like a part of the training is making sure you touch on that. And not only does it help the harder sessions be better, but it's also, adapting your body to being able to take in that fuel.
Yeah, because the gut, as we've heard from expert editions on the show here, Amanda, is trainable. And how often might you do that race fueling during training? Like one session a week, or on hard sessions several times a week, or variable?
Yeah, a bit variable. But for example, when I'm in a training block like I will be at the moment, where we'll be doing sort of 3-day blocks, 4-day blocks, and within each of those blocks, I'll have 1 or 2 days which are really hard. So on those days, probably at least one of those sessions will be race fueling. So I'd say probably 2 times a week at the moment are the real race fueling ones. And then around that also, the recovery meals after, making sure that I'm ready to go the next day. Yeah,
gosh. And working with Louise Burke, internationally regarded leading researcher and clinician in the field of dietetics, sports dietetics. You've got a great asset, once again, and great people around you. Amanda, what about hydration? What could you share with listeners around hydration learnings that you've picked up through your career?
Yeah, I think for me, hydration is a really big one, and a big one to stay on top of. I think, back in the day, you used to think, a bit dehydrated, a bit less weight on you, but actually that's okay. Lighter to go up climbs, or we always think a bit about the, power to weight up a climb. And then, then the research comes out and says, actually, it's better to be hydrated and a bit heavier, and you have more power and more ability to suffer and ride through it. So I think that's always a key learning for me, is that, hydration is really important, and to keep on top of it from the start of big training or big races, and even the day before, making sure you're really hydrated. So it's amazing the amount of bottles we'll go through in training or in racing. In hot conditions, we'll be going upwards of over 1.5 liters an hour easily, especially in a race like Tokyo, where we had the humidity as well. So it's something that's just as important, I think, as fueling the body.
And in those key events, you will have ingestion targets. Is that correct? Trying to hit or drinking to thirst?
Drinking to thirst, definitely, but I think more targeting, you want to have this much fluid per hour, 1.5 liters or more, or whatever it's going to be. Because I think if you're drinking to thirst, if you get to the point where you're thirsty, then normally it's too late. Yeah. So you really need to keep on top of it and already have the fluids coming in. And even, I prefer to have a bit in, and then a drink bottle, and then have a really big sip rather than just little sips all the time. For me, that works better. Then I'm just getting it in one gulp, and then a little rest, and then drink again. So for me, that's easier. When I'm riding a bike, I don't have to always pick up my drink bottle every 2 minutes.
There's that aversion to the patience, however you have demonstrated times in your career. And what about things like your salt concentration, sweat concentration, I should say? Is that something that you've really dialed in over the years?
To be honest, it's not something that I've really dialed in yet, but certainly we're aware of like the salts and the sweat and getting in. Yeah, we always make sure we have a combination of electrolytes within the carb drinks as well, to make sure. It's obviously a lot of salt and sodium loss, so trying to really get that back in the body as well. So that's definitely really important. But we know that we're definitely sweating a lot and releasing a lot, so we really want to get that back in as well.
Yeah, no, totally. You mentioned key sessions just before. Amanda, what are some of the key sessions that you like to get in a good hard training block? Are there any go-tos where you're like, yep, I'm getting back in shape, or I am in shape?
Yeah, I think, I definitely have some go-to sessions. And again, it depends a bit what races are coming up. But one definitely go-to session is sort of a 20/40s session. So it'll be 20 seconds sort of maximal power, but it's not maximal. It's a 20-second power that I can repeat multiple times. So, and then 40 seconds still sort of a solid power, and then 20 seconds again a maximal, and then 40 seconds. So I'll do that 10 times. So that's sort of by the end of it, you're sort of seeing stars and can't really see properly. But for me, that's a session where I know I'm really getting back into it. On the other side, I also do really high power sessions. So I've been doing, particularly coming back from that surgery last year, I lost a lot of that sort of punch. It's not my biggest strength anyway as a rider, that real punch and a real acceleration. So I've been doing more sessions with sort of 30-second max uphill sprints, and then maybe 2-3 minutes easier between, and just multiple sets of those. Maybe there's 6 reps in a set or something like that, and then multiple. So the overall session might not be really long, but it's just that really top, high end. And they're the sort of efforts where you start the first couple and you think, oh yeah, not too bad. Like, I got this, it's fine. And then sort of by the fourth one, you're like, oh gosh, yep, everything's hurting. And then by the last one, you're like, I call it the vomit session, because I always think, make sure you have your breakfast well before. And because this is the one that ends up with you on the side of the road, sort of laying down, and you need a few moments to compose yourself and then get back off and start riding again. But that's probably, one of my hardest sessions, or probably one of the more challenging ones for me, because it's not my strength and something that I really have to work on. And I know when I feel like at the end of it, then I've done a good job.
You're on the side of the road holding your stomach, or wiping off the stomach contents. From a training cycle point of view, are you on certain day training cycles, 7-day, 10-day, 14-day, or not specifically?
We probably do it more in like smaller blocks. So maybe like a lot of the time I'm doing sort of 3-day blocks. So it'll be 3-day block, and then an easy day, and then a 3-day block, easy day, going like that, because it's a bit tricky with our race schedule. Because, for example, in March and April, I only really have time for maybe a 6 or 7-day period where I can train. And either side of that, there's a race, and then sometimes we have a race and we only have 4 days and then another race again. And it also depends on sort of the racing coming up. So, for example, my next big goal is going to be the Giro d'Italia, which is in the beginning of July. So we have the Giro, and then we have 2 weeks, and then we have the Tour de France. So I've sort of sat down and had a look at the course for the Giro, and I can see there that we're going to have 3 solid days, and then we're going to have an easier day, or a rest day actually. And then there'll be a sort of a bigger period, 4 or 5 days of needing to be on. So now for the next period, we're going to sort of use more of the blocks that we need for the Giro for that, to prepare for that. So I'll see more like 3-day blocks, and then an easier day, and then more of a 4-day block, and then we'll sort of periodize it and match it a bit more to the demands of the competition coming up. So it definitely changes a little bit depending on the demands and what my goals are.
In the racing calendar, I asked Louis Delahaye that question, who we just mentioned earlier, coach of Annemiek van Vleuten, and his response, I won't forget it, was, the training cycle's as long as it needs to be. In other words, mirroring exactly what you just shared, Amanda, and that's it depends. It depends on where we are in the season and what's coming up. You mentioned, Amanda, you might have 2-3 weeks max off a bike. During that time, do you get off the bike or do a bit of cross training, or do you go cold turkey, switch off from training, or do you keep a little bit on the bike? Curiosity question more than anything else.
So normally, the season gets a little bit later the last few years, but normally by October, we're ready for 2-3 weeks. We call it the off-season break, whatever you want to call it. And normally for me, I will have 2 weeks of I don't touch my bike. Normally by that point, I just put it away. I really enjoy hiking and a bit of swimming, or probably more hiking. I have attempted running a few times, but normally that ends with an extremely fit cyclist trying to run with no running technique and ending up injured. So I've shelved that one for a while because, I ended a couple of off seasons injured from running. So I've learned that, I may be extremely fit, but it doesn't always translate across all sports. But Yeah, so we call it a bit of active recovery. Normally a week completely off the bike and then just active recovery again. I have a gravel bike, or a mountain bike, so I might get out on that and have a ride and not worry about what power I'm doing or anything, just have a fun ride. So that's always enjoyable. And also during the season, like I've just finished Liège, Bastogne-Liège, and after that I had 5-6 days of just, you can do what you want for training. If it's hiking, if it's gravel riding, that's fine. And for me, that's something that's important for me in a season as well as after the season, is just to have those moments where I can switch off, if that's just 3-4 days off, or at the end of the season, it's 2-3 weeks, because I'm just not someone that can be 100% switched on 100% of the time in a whole year. So I really value just having those 4 or 5 days of, okay, yeah, don't go crazy, but just enjoy switch off time. And then I know once it's time to start again, then I'm fully focused and ready for my next goals. So that's the approach I like to take.
Yeah, gosh, lots of wisdom in that approach. Amanda, before we throw to this performance round, I must also ask you, what training metrics or monitoring metrics do you use to look at your progression with training? Any key data that you like to keep an eye on, yourself and your coach?
We look a lot. Well, I use Training Peaks, so all my training goes into that. And then my coach, Gene Bates, he's sort of monitoring on that and just looking more on, I don't monitor sleep or things like that. It's just something we haven't done. But more just looking at the training and the periodization and how that's looking, as well as a lot of feedback. Like we communicate regularly, so we're looking a lot of the time at that. And in terms of metrics, my body weight and composition is something that I'm always working on, and sort of a key metric, especially for me as a climber. It's an important one. So that's something that we keep an eye on. And with Louise as well, that's something I'm always working on.
How do you manage that across the season, Amanda? Your body weight, body mass. Obviously, it's so critical for a leanness sport such as cycling. How do you manage it?
Yeah, it can be a bit of a challenge, and I think I'm not, naturally always a leaner athlete. So it's more, I guess, periodizing it. We obviously have the end of the year where it's a bit more off season and coming back, and then with Louise now, we've sort of come up with a bit more of a plan towards the goals coming up, especially something like Giro and Tour, which is really climbing heavy, and I'm really targeting the GC there. So we've sort of got a 2-month period now where we'll come up with a plan with different deficits, energy deficits essentially, throughout that period to sort of drop the body mass down. But in the end, there's a lot of, we're communicating in terms of how I'm feeling, and particularly in this year's been a bit more of a challenge coming back from the surgery, because I haven't felt great all the time, because it's been a pretty steep comeback, and we've been introducing intensity, and then it's like, am I feeling bad because of the intensity or fueling, or sort of just, I've always thought I had a really good sense of how my body feels and can give really good feedback, but I've probably been a bit more unsure this year, just because I've been trying to work out if this how my body's responding and this kind of thing. So it's been helpful to have someone like Louise to sort of sit down and help me plan that. So a bit more periodizing it, knowing that the ones where it's more climbing heavy and where I really need to be at my best is July. So then we make a plan, come backwards from that, and then make a plan.
Reverse engineer. Amanda, are you ready for the performance round? You can talk this up as a session for the day.
Oh, okay, ready. Bring it on.
My questions, here they come. Training session most disliked.
Oh, I think I already mentioned this one, but I think the 30-second max vomit session.
The vomit. 6 reps, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What recovery is there between those?
1.5, 2 minutes recovery, and then 6 reps, and then I might do that 3 times. 3 by 6. Yeah.
I recall doing Wingate 30-second all-out tests at university for my exercise science degree, and it doesn't sound like much, but if you lay it down for 30 seconds, you don't want to lay it down again.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh gosh, 10 seconds goes quite quick, but the last 20 doesn't. Training session most loved, Amanda?
I love it when I just have a long endurance ride, like 4 or 5, even 6-hour endurance ride, because for me, that's like an adventure ride. And I love maps. I'm a bit of a map nerd. I like going on Strava and looking at routes and like planning a route and being excited about where I'm going to go and try new roads and make my ride map look pretty. I think I'm the only one who loves that. But for me, that's just fun. I really love the adventure part of cycling, and that's something I just like. Yeah, that you can ride in all different places. And for me, it's not a stress if I'm in a new place that I've never been before, because that's more exciting.
Yeah, gosh, it's part of the beauty of the sport. Favorite pre-race meal, Amanda Spratt?
Favorite, love porridge, some good bread, maybe an omelette, yogurt, this kind of thing. If it's more of a climbing stage or just, more of a harder race or something where I just want to be a bit more simple, then I love just rice, honey, yogurt together is nice as well.
Rice, honey and yogurt. Bedtime, morning time, what's that look like?
Bedtime, around 10 p.m. That's pretty standard, unless when I'm rooming with my Spanish teammate who has dinner at 10, then it can stretch out a bit. But wake up around 8. But I need quite a few coffees before I get out the door. Everyone knows I'm not a morning person. Don't come near me in the morning.
That's brilliant, though. Well done. Who's the athlete you most admire and why?
Most admired, I think, Marianne Vos. So we call her the GOAT, greatest of all time. But she's the same age as me. We've come through juniors together, and she's just won everything there is to win across multiple disciplines, and just the longevity that she's had in the sport, and the most humble person that you'll ever meet. So for me, I admire her a lot.
Yeah, wow, Marianne Vos. Toughest competitor you've ever raced against, who and why?
I've mentioned her as already, but definitely Annemiek van Vleuten. I think toughest competitor. I just think, just can suffer like no one I've seen before, knows what she wants, chases after it. And I think a lot of the time we go into races and we know that this is the point where she's going to attack, because this is the hardest climb of the race, and everyone knows what her tactic is. And a lot of the time it doesn't matter, because she's just so strong and so tough that, she can ride away and win it. And that's what happened in Yorkshire. We all knew she was going to attack at that point, and she did it, and there's nothing we can do about it. 100K later, solo world champion. So
100K solo to the line. It's impressive, isn't it? Is there a mantra that you use when you race or compete, Amanda?
I just think never give up. Never give up. Keep riding. Push through the pain. But definitely never give up.
Never give up. Best recovery tip?
Definitely, I've mentioned it before, but sleep is definitely one for me. And that's probably something I've realized more in recent years, how important that is for the recovery. Another one, which it will be a sponsor plug, but I use the Amp Human, the Momentous PR lotion. And for me, that's something I was introduced to by a sports scientist on our team actually a few years ago. But that's sort of been, really amazing to come across and to start using that, particularly just for if I have a hard training block where 2-3 days in a row, and I know I really want to benefit the recovery, then just using some of the PR lotion on the legs, especially, my quads, especially in the last period when they've been really hurting or just getting back into it, that's been really beneficial. That lowers the pH toxicity of the muscles, and it's just directly into the muscles, and using that even in massages as well. We'll use that in the massage. So that's been something really beneficial for me in recovery.
Yeah, and fellow Australian cyclist, professional cyclist Cam Worth, he echoed that sentiment actually. So there you go. That's twice now for Amp Human PR lotion, Momentous. One word to describe your racing style, Amanda. What would that be?
Calculated.
Calculated. Nice. First, how would you describe being in the zone?
Being in the zone is you don't hear anything around you. I think if there's crowds there, you're not hearing the crowds. You're just calm. You just have an understanding or an awareness completely of what's around you, and you just know what to do.
Gosh, that's a beautiful description. When was the last time you were in that zone?
I think Liège was a good one. I think my last one-day race, which I mentioned before, where I was 10th. I think I was really in the zone for that race. Really motivated before, and knew my form was coming up, and there, definitely in the zone there. I knew, I go back and watch the footage, and for example, on La Redoute, we had, the crowds were absolutely amazing. Didn't hear them. So went back and watched it and thought, wow.
It's in the zone.
So I'm sorry for all those people that cheer for me when I'm in the zone.
So I think that's very understandable. And final question here, Amanda, in the performance round. What's the hardest session you can ever recall doing? We know that epic sessions alone don't make champions, but out of interest, what would be the hardest session you can?
Gosh, I think probably during the lockdown period, a lot of people were doing the Everesting challenge during the lockdown period, and I was in Switzerland then, so I was able to ride outside. So we didn't do an Everesting, but sort of my coach with Jean, we decided that sort of every week I wanted to have a different challenge just to keep it exciting, and I like challenges. And one challenge was to do, I think it was a 5 or 6 hour ride, and the most amount of altitude gain I can get in that time, but I wasn't allowed to go up the same road more than once. So this it was epic and hard, but at the same time it was good for my map obsession. So I could create the map with all the different roads and climbs, and but in this ride, I think it was 6 hours and 5,500 meters of climbing.
Wow.
And I just remember being destroyed by the end, but also equally happy and satisfied. So, that was a fun one. Yep.
That's a lot of altitude gain. Well done, Amanda. You're out of the performance round. A supplementary, if you like, to that performance round would be a curious question. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen in the pro peloton?
Oh, gosh. Well, we have a lot of Italian riders in the peloton, and they are rather vocal and emotional. And I remember one of my earliest Giro d'Italias, which would have been when I was 18 or 19. And there were 2 Italian riders that, I don't know, they disagreed over something, and they're very emotional. And one unclipped and took a foot out and kicked the other rider. And then, there was almost like a fist fight in front of me in the peloton. I just thought, wow, I was a young Australian, very shy, didn't say a word in a peloton. Didn't know you could. So I definitely learned a few new words, Italian words in that moment. But
You're well versed in the Italian profanity lexicon now. Amanda, every guest of the show issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. What is Amanda Spratt's physical challenge going to be?
Okay, I think, I had a couple of things in mind, but I think after this discussion today, I'm going to throw out the vomit session as a challenge to everybody. I know I've really sold it, so I know everyone's going to be really excited about this. But I think a ride and 2 sets of the 6 times 30-second max on a climb with 1.5 minutes between. Let me know how it goes.
And we will tag you in as we take this challenge on. That's 2 lots of the 6 by 30-second all-out efforts with 1.5 minutes of recovery. And we'll tag you in at Amanda Spratt 87 over on Instagram.
Can't wait.
Some pictures. We need pictures of the vomit. I think that's only fair, right?
Yeah, definitely. I want roadside shots after it.
Roadside shots. That would be brilliant. Amanda, every guest has also issued this set question, and that is, if you could boil everything you've learnt through your career to date, extensive career to date, and ongoing, into one single piece of advice to help listeners of this show perform at their physical best, what would Amanda Spratt's solitary piece of advice be?
It's a hard one. I think definitely surround yourself with good people, but I'm going to take one that my coach shared with me recently, and he said, be your biggest believer, not your biggest critic. And I think for me, that's just been a really amazing bit of advice, and I think it stretches across all different areas. But I think if you believe in yourself and believe in what you can do and have goals that you believe in, it's okay to be critical, but the most important thing is that you believe in it, and then everyone around you will as well. And I think that's really important.
Be your biggest believer and not your biggest critic.
Yeah.
Gosh, as a young Amanda Spratt coming up through the AIS system, that advice would have been pretty impactful to a young aspiring rider full of doubts and fears and trying to find her way in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why I loved it and why it's stuck with me. And I love that advice is relevant for everybody. It's relevant for me right now, for a younger athlete, for anyone. So I think, I really value that.
That's powerful. Be your biggest believer and not your biggest critic. Amanda, you've already touched on a few of the exciting things coming up, the Giro, the Tour de France, World Championships, pending selection, obviously, at the end of the year for Team Australia, Wollongong. What else are you looking at? It's a big calendar.
Yeah, they're definitely the main ones. The Giro is really exciting this year. We have really big mountain stages towards the end. It's just a really nice GC Giro. the Tour de France as well. I've been in recon a couple of those later stages, and I just think the hype around the Tour de France is going to be huge. I know like the SBS Australian, television is going to be there and covering it. So it feels like, a dream's coming true. And a lot of people have said it before that, I always get asked, do you race the Olympics? Do you race the Tour de France? And I've always had to say no to the Tour de France question. And now I can finally say yes, I race the Tour de France. So that's something that's going to be amazing.
Yeah, gosh. And so fitting. What a great example of the maturation of a global sport. It's fantastic to see. And Amanda, you've had a big part in inspiring many Australian athletes across the board and in the cycling community. So thank you for stopping by the Physical Performance Show and sharing so generously.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. It's been a pleasure.